Tim Ariano. This hour has just flown by. LeAnne, you are a wealth of information. Thank you so much for coming on. We were just talking a little bit on the break, and I was mentioning that I had heard from someone who's in the know that domestic violence, he's with the police department, he's noticed that domestic violence is significantly increasing, but he says it's not the lower socioeconomic populations. They'll still have their issues. He said it's the middle class that, both of them are out of work. There's depression involved, there's drug abuse involved, alcoholism involved, and it's, I don't remember what the statistic is, but like 1 in 4 or something. It's very shocking that women will be involved in a domestic violence situation at least some point in their life. I think it's even 1 in 3. I'll have to go back and look.
It is 1 in 3, and it's still one of the top leading sources of injury for women.
Wow, and that's amazing. So it happens, and so just being there and being intuitive and helping and supporting your friends is the way to go. So, and there's lots of assistance for that. And we'll post a lot of that. I think I'm going to do a little extra blog this time, and we'll post. I'll have LeAnne help me, and we'll post some resources for folks that need help. But I want to learn a little bit about you. So how did you get involved in all of this? How did you find your way? I mean, you had mentioned you had done some work in Michigan, but what was it? When were you called to go into community service?
Well, my dad was a minister, so I think it's in my genes.
Oh.
I don't think I was raised to be, I don't know, something else. But I think it was my first job out of college where I was working at a community center in Michigan, in the inner city, and was doing more work around food pantry work and working with children and women, and that's where I first got to know women who are in domestic violence situations. And I also just got really tired of doing the Band-Aid work and seeing the same people month after month coming in for food, and I wanted to stop that cycle. And I also remember very clearly, where I was standing, talking to a woman's caseworker on the phone, trying to advocate for her. And when she told me, this woman would be better off divorcing her husband, they could get more benefits if they weren't married. And I just, again, was looking at how screwed up is our system. and thought, I really want to work on some of the root causes of why people are in this situation, and mainly women. I didn't go into that job thinking about women, but as I saw that women were the most affected by poverty and these things, I thought that's a solution for helping to address these problems. So a few years later, after a different stint, I started this organization that helped low-income women start small businesses, and some of them, I still remember this one story, Sandy, who had this dream of running an auto body shop. She had an autistic son, single mom, autistic son, and we worked because there were issues around bonding and everything, and she went through a training program, and then I left and I moved out to Seattle, and I came back years later for like the 10 or 15 year anniversary, and she just bounded up to me, big grin. She didn't have one business, she had 3 different businesses.
Wow.
A towing business, a body shop business, and some of her business, and she wanted to go to Uganda or something to help other women try to start businesses.
Wow, pay it forward. That's incredible. So now you find yourself out in Seattle.
Right. So I had decided to move out to Seattle. I hadn't gotten this job. I had applied for the job, and I saw the connection of still continuing to work with women and building opportunities for women. And also I love working with people who are philanthropic and want to align their values with making a difference through giving. And so it was a really good match.
It was a good fit for you. And where does that passion, do you think, comes from when you look at, because when I looked around the room at the people that were there at the event, there was a deeper level of stuff going on. There are people who are very, very passionate about helping women and helping children, especially in this state. It shocks me that we have issues that we have. I mean, there's still a gap. There's still a significant gap. that we need to cover.
Right, and I think it's easy to not be aware of that gap because things on the surface look okay. Like I said, more than, women are half the workforce. So if you don't go deep enough and look at, well, what does that equate to in terms of finances and opportunity? And I think in some ways things, whether it's racism or sexism, are more dangerous when they're subtle. So, for example, another story of there's a woman recently that had worked as a web designer for a company and became pregnant. And her employer soon started, and she worked from home part-time, started giving her a bad time about why wasn't she glowing? She was sick from the pregnancy. She was having, other women are glowing. She has a negative attitude. And she had...
Boy, I had a negative attitude, and I wasn't glowing when I was pregnant. I just about took some people out.
She had the baby, and she asked to... And she was delivering on her work, and she asked to work more hours from home. And the employer refused and said, well, I know what's going to happen. The baby's going to take top priority. And no, and she was fired. And, so there are...
I didn't think you could do that.
Well, it was couched in around
performance issues.
Yeah.
Right.
And so Legal Voice, an organization we support, took this case up and on her behalf won a suit. And there are other, examples. They've also taken cases to support women who have had to take time off for domestic violence reasons to go to court and things, and employers have fired them about that. And so, and if you talk to women in the trades, you hear it all the time. I talked to a woman who had been a forklift, driver for 30 years, and she talked to a man who owned a company, a very well-known company, which I will not name, and she said to him, I want to work for you someday. And he said, honey, you girls are a liability waiting to happen. I will never hire you. And so on the surface it looks okay, and you dig deeper and there's a long ways to go. And I think what you feel at our events, which is what a lot of people feel, is the power of women and men, because we have amazing men who support us, of coming together and saying, this isn't good enough and we can do better. And so that's what we're about. As
long as I can do something about it, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Well, I have to share my story because I don't talk about this very often, but it's very relevant, and I think it might be helpful to some folks out there. I was in a situation where I got pregnant for the first time, and I had never experienced outwardly any kind of discrimination. I'm just not that kind of person. I kind of bull my way through whatever it is I want to do. And I never thought about differences in pay or anything. I'm sure it happened, but I never researched it much. But I was pregnant with my first child, and we got a first new manager, and he was down in California, and they flew all of us in to meet him for the first time. I think it was 5.5 months, maybe 6 months pregnant, and there wasn't any hello, hi, nice to meet you. He, shook my hand and awkwardly said, you're going to have to tell me about this maternity leave thing because my wife stayed home with all of her kids. And the little red flag went up, and I'm like, that's kind of an interesting thing to say. And what had happened after that is he had restructured my territory, so the territory that I had was given to somebody else that was new, and I was given a different territory that would have required me to travel, and the excuse from that is you're going to be out with the kid, we need somebody who's consistently in front of the customer. And I had never experienced, no discussion on, what are your plans, how are you, just an assumption was made. And I had never experienced anything like that. Never. And it can happen to anybody. And, he actually said stuff to me, so I knew it was going on. But I think a lot of people are put through hell, and they don't know why. And it's because there's this, maybe even an unconscious bias towards women in the workplace.